Lawwin Media Network,
bringing to you the most relevant content across all platforms.
business, legal, politics, health, lifestyle, and entertainment.
Your source for all the news and updates in the greater Houston community from Texas and all over the world.
Get informed and empowered with Lawwin Media Network.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Pink Table Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Carly D., a doctorally prepared registered nurse, professional development specialist, mentor, educator, victims advocate, and thriver. The show is produced by Lawwin Media Network, and we film live every Wednesday at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. You can catch us on Lawwin Media Network Live through our YouTube, Facebook, Twitch TV, and over 18 different podcast platforms, including Apple, Amazon, Google, and Spotify. So this has been such a great week so far. I celebrated a birthday on Monday. So I've been enjoying this week and pampering myself and finally getting some gifts and treats for myself, which is different from my usual. So I've been having a really wonderful and relaxed week so far. So tonight, we're going to be talking about a very special topic that is dear to my heart. We're going to actually be giving some voices to the silence in our community tonight. We're going to be talking about Black mental health and the lack of resources within the community. Tonight, we're going to be joined by licensed practice counselor Chioma Ahaiwe. She's going to be talking to us today about Black mental health and the struggles and how she provides culturally competent care. Black mental health is dear to me because it's often an issue that is overlooked by society, and it has definitely been burdened by systemic neglect. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Black adults in the U.S. are more likely to report emotional distress, but they're less likely to receive treatment compared to white or Caucasian adults. The disparity in access to care only affects 35% of Black adults with mental illness. They receive treatment compared to 51.8% of white adults. Underrepresentation in mental health workforce is about 4% of psychologists in the United States are Black. So tonight, joining us with Chioma Ahaiwe, she is one of those underrepresented minorities in the Black mental health sector. So welcome to our show, Chioma.
Oh, thank you for having me. I genuinely appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. I'm absolutely honored to have you on the show. when we met earlier this year, just our conversation was so compelling, and it just really made me so emotional, just hearing the work that you're doing. And so I'm just so honored to have you here.
Well, thank you. I mean, we connected at a gala that was basically celebrating mental health, and all the amazing things that are going on within the community and how everyone is attempting to grow the field. And so, yeah, I'm just honored that you thought of me today.
Yes, thank you so much. So for our audience at home, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your upbringing, your educational background, and how you got to where you are today?
Of course. So, again, my name's Chioma Ahaiwe. I started in education. I was working as a fourth grade teacher. And as I was going through my career, I realized that a lot of my students, because I was serving an underserved community, a lot of my students lacked emotional regulation. So then that,
Yes.
of course, caused me to be curious about some of the resources that are available to them. I wanted to better understand some of the trauma that they had experienced, and I also wanted to understand how generational behaviors and patterns were showing up in not only the way that they were responding, but also in the way that they were learning. And so that brought me to seek out education, further education at Lamar, where I went and got my master's in clinical mental health. From there, worked in various settings. I wanted to get my feet wet in a lot of different places before I landed on private practice. So I worked in rehabilitation centers. I worked at an outpatient facility. I did some inpatient work. I worked in the juvenile system providing care. I worked with foster care system. And all of that led me to really realizing how underrepresented Black therapists were, right? And every avenue I was walking into in all those different places, I didn't see many people of color. Um, and so that made me, of course, want to say, okay, how can I continue to serve people of color, and be an advocate for those spaces?
Wow, wonderful. What a tremendous journey. So interesting. I always love to see how people end up kind of where they are in their educational and professional journeys. So that's wonderful. And tremendous job to you for working with fourth graders.
Thank you. I did that for 7 years. So it was
Oh
great.
my, oh yes, I'm sure you got a few gray hairs from that.
Mhm, mhm. Definitely.
Uh,
Definitely.
yeah, so you said something interesting when you were talking about your role as an educator. You said that you noticed that they learned differently. Can you
Mhm.
go into that more and talk about that?
I realistically, right? We all need the foundation of education in order to carry us on over into adulthood, right? So just the basics. But for some, in some aspects, education wasn't at the forefront because the focus was more so survival, right? So
Mm.
if I'm focused on my day to day, what my home life is going to be like, whether that I have food, whether I'm able to take care of my siblings, if that's my journey, whether I have shelter for the day, then of course that's going to impact my ability to show up in the classroom and my ability to be focused. And so understanding that and saying, okay, to some degree, there's a level of empathy, but there also needs to be a level of patience, right? Understand as an educator all these different nuances that are at play that are also systemic, that are
Yeah.
playing a part in how they're showing up in their ability to learn.
Wow, that's so interesting. I never really thought about it like that. I know we often focus on whether a child is hungry coming into school and how that affects their learning, so that's why they develop the food programs. But we don't think about all of the other things that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm.
Um, would you say that there are barriers and resources for those children and even for those parents?
I would say that there are resources. However, we could always do better, right?
Yes.
I think naively, I underestimated at the time how much trauma and anxiety can hinder focus, right?
Yes.
To some
Yes.
degree, I think it would be beneficial for parents to understand the ways in which anxiety shows up, how it affects our ability to regulate and stay focused, and how that may prevent us from even being motivated, right? If I'm feeling anxious or depressed, I may not be as motivated that day to sit in a classroom for a certain amount of hours because of, again, all those other things that I have carrying on, right? So even as adults, I may wake up one day and just not be into it. I may be like, I'm just not feeling it today, right? For factors that may not be as traumatic, but still to some degree, some level of stress that's hindering my work performance. And so bearing that in mind when you're dealing with kids too, that is also a factor. And then of course, the stigma of needing to show up and be strong or persevere and be resilient. And so not being able to hold space for sadness, for hurt, for disappointment, or frustration.
Mm. Yes. Wow. A few years back, the movie Inside Out came out. And for me, I absolutely love that movie because I have worked in pediatrics, and I love it because it showed the different emotions, and the children were able to really relate and be like, you know what, I'm feeling like, the red guy who was like
Ah,
anger.
mhm.
And then, or they could say they felt like the blue girl, everybody could relate to her, because she was so sad, and so for me, I love that they brought those characters to life, they were emotions, and it allowed children to be able to have sort of a visual on what they were feeling on the inside, and to be able to express that. So I thought that was really a fun movie.
I mean, I agree. I think the biggest thing that would be beneficial for people of color is the aspect of like psychoeducation, and not just as a
Yes.
to mental health, but the health field period, right? Like a level of understanding of what things are, how they show up, why they're showing up. I think could be extremely beneficial if people are able to understand what it is that they're experiencing and why.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think in our community we're taught what those expressions are and how to express those. I think that we can all say that we felt anxious at times, or angry, or nervous, or stressed, but we weren't actually able to put word to that and to express it effectively, or in healthy ways. So I think that's part of it too. Some people I've spoken to in the community say, oh, depression doesn't even exist, and to me, I'm just shocked. I'm like, of course it exists, so, it's just interesting.
I mean, you know, that is definitely a stigma that is, running rampant to some degree. I think more now than what in previous years, we've been more accepting or open to the idea that we are all dealing with some form of depression, whether it be seasonal or ongoing. And we're all dealing with some level of anxiety, again, whether it be like ongoing or just in the moment. I think depression has so many faces. It looks vastly different from person to person. And specifically with, people of color, it shows up in the body a lot more than it shows up in ways of just like crying or, things like that. It may show up in the form of headaches, insomnia,
Yes.
back pain,
Yes.
fatigue.
Yes.
So
Yes.
all those things, right? Hypervigilance, all of those things
Yes.
are signs of depression, right? Of
Yes.
feeling like you have to show up and be there for everyone, or be there for everyone around you. A dissatisfaction with the meeting of goals. All of those could be telltale signs of some form of depression. I think people think of depression as like, oh, I'm sullen and sad, and I'm like, it's a spectrum. It's not. It doesn't have to be that severe. So, yeah.
Yes, it's so true. And all those symptoms you just said, I think I have all of those, but I think it's related to motherhood.
We all do to some degree.
Yes. Oh, this is so interesting. What a wonderful discussion so far. We're going to go to our first commercial break of the evening, but everybody stay tuned for more Pink Table Talk with Chioma Ahaiwe.
In a world filled with fleeting moments, there's beauty waiting to be captured. My name is Christian, and I specialize in immortalizing your most precious memories. From elegant weddings to vibrant events and timeless portraits, I'm here to make every moment unforgettable. Let me tell your story through the lens. Contact me today and let's create magic together.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Pink Table Talk. Tonight, we're talking about Black mental health in the community. Before we went on break, we started to discuss Chioma Ahaiwe's practice and how she got to this journey from education to psychology. We have a few comments from an audience member. Mimi De Vera says, she's genuinely curious because the world is already evolving, in which she hopes it is also improving. Is there any difference from the statistics of the past to the present? So I'll have you answer that, Chioma.
Regarding the statistics, I mean, statistics have their ebbs and flows, but I think for the most part, they're generally about the same. I do know that there seems to be more of an interest from people of color and women in particular being open and receptive to mental health care services. I think there's still a disparity as it relates to men seeking mental health services. But again, I think that's so due to the representation of men in the field. So.
Yes. Wow. Very good. That's a really good question. Thank you. And then she had another question regarding depression of people of color versus whites. People, is there differences? Does it present differently? What is your take on that, Chioma?
I would say that it does present differently. Before we went to commercial break, I spoke briefly about that. For people of color, due to trauma, our experience of depression may be a bit different due to the fact that there may be a level of discomfort with expressing or emoting emotionally. So whether that be through crying or, this belief that you have to continue to persevere, which is why I spoke to like hypervigilance, that lends itself to signs of depression, right? This belief system that you aren't allowed rest, that you aren't able to take rest, it also shows up in the way in which people of color experience depression. As opposed to our counterparts with white people, there isn't less of a stigma around rest and emoting and being emotional and being outward with the emotion, right? I think for people of color, there's an expectation to present and show up and be on, right? Our depression, it is unraveling that belief system and the need to show up and present as on and okay, despite all that may be going on physically, like I said, with the headaches and the insomnia and the back pain and the fatigue and things like that.
Wow. Interesting. And so tell us more about your practice. What is your approach to therapy?
So in my practice, I try to do like a collaborative. So I tend to lean more like experimental. I utilize CBT throughout, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And then to some degree, I may do like art or music. I try to essentially meet clients where they are. So since I serve ages 14 and up, that requires me to be multifaceted, essentially. My goal is to just say, what are you in need of, and how are we going to get to the end goal? So if you're a person that prefers just genuine talk therapy, we can talk through it, right? However, if I feel like it would be beneficial for you to write, I see that journaling or writing and reflecting could be helpful or beneficial, then we'll lean more like experimental. And then, of course, if I notice that you are a person that's musically inclined, who's receptive to those kind of things, then we'll incorporate that. All of it is grossed, or, all of it is basically used for me to get to the foundation of whatever that core belief is, which is a part of CBT, and saying, okay, these are the negative beliefs you're holding about yourself that are lying dormant. How are these beliefs then influencing the way you think, the way you perceive, the way you receive, and the rules that you apply to yourself and how you interact with others and things like that? So my approach is eclectic, but the foundation is CBT.
Wonderful, wonderful. I love CBT, and I've been learning more and more about it over the past couple of years. I think it's very helpful for a lot of people who medications weren't really working for. I think in the past, they used to throw medications on a lot of issues with mental health. But then we started to see that those methods weren't that effective. So people also needed to have behavioral modifications. They needed to learn tools to use in everyday life. So I definitely am a big fan of CBT.
Yeah. I mean, in school, you of course are given the lay of the land of all the various, theoretical orientations. But during basically, I would call it like your residency, that's where you hone your skill and you decide for yourself what avenue or which approach works best for you. I would say, right, with any person seeking out a therapist, the majority of it is connection. Do you feel like the person that you're talking to sees you in a way where you can show up and be authentic and honest and raw or silly or whatever it is needed for them, for that day? So if it's more about connection, and then once the trust and the rapport is there, then that allows for everything else to flow easily.
Wonderful, wonderful. On that note, let's talk about the stigma. How do you help clients that have these internalized ideas about therapy, or they see it as a weakness?
We go and dive head first into those stigmas, right? Where do those beliefs derive? And not to generalize, but they can come from so many different places that we may not even be mindful of, right? Some may say they rely on faith, and you know what I mean? So then that calls into, okay, well, your faith is of course incorporated to some degree, based on your therapist in therapy, right? A lot of it is having faith in yourself and having faith in the person that you're leaning on to assist you in your journey. But I think, the stigmas around this idea that something is wrong. Like if you go to therapy, you have some kind of like genuine problem is requiring of some sort of medication. So of course it's unpacking the idea that that there is something more to it than just simply, hey, life is stressful. Why would I not want to equip myself with tools to deal with the stress? Communicating can be challenging. Communicating with people can be challenging. We can speak the same language and not speak the same language, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And that as well. So just unpacking some of those belief systems, where they're derived from, and if they're serving you. if holding those beliefs about therapy, are they working to your benefit? Do you feel like you're seeing the kind of growth that you would want to see in yourself? Are you having the kind of relationships that you would want to have? Or is there room for improvement?
Yes, absolutely. Do you think media has a play in these stigmas or these stereotypes surrounding mental health?
To some degree, I think that as of late, media has been pushing mental health services. However,
Yes.
there's also been on the flip side of that a discomfort with the learning of empathy and social emotional learning and everything. Like, so we're in a weird dichotomy where therapy is being promoted, but at the same time aspects of therapy are being shut down. So I think originally the intent was to encourage everyone to seek therapy services because we see how beneficial it is. But I think time will tell how that progresses over the next few years.
Yes. Wow. Also, in the same line as that, since you deal with young clients starting at age 14, I recently read some statistics that because of social media, we do see a lot more teenagers now experiencing like body issues, anxiety, depression, even SI. What is your take on that? And have you seen this rise as well?
There is a rise of kids experiencing self-harm and suicidal ideation. Um, I think it is a multitude of things. I think social media is a factor, right? And the ability to have access to so much
Yes.
information in one place, um,
Yes.
which is to some degree increasing their sense of anxiety. It has been heightened. There is more, anxiousness in terms of like, kids experiencing like body dysmorphia due to filters and all of that. I do
Yes.
also think to some degree our kids experience that. But at the same time, I think our kids are also more receptive to mental health services because of social media. So again, it's very conflicting.
Yes.
There is an issue in social media with there being so much access and then their peers being able to interact with them 24 hours a day with with little to no supervision to some degree because we can only monitor but so much, right?
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
not able to be that overbearing. But
Yes.
on the other end of that, it's also like, well, they do become curious, they do seek out services, they will, they do understand the benefit, you know what I mean? So it's a interesting space, to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's a double-edged sword, I feel like you said, I feel like social media is kind of normalizing, people and their feelings. Because people go on there and they vent. People are like, oh, they had a bad day, they're feeling, depressed, anxious, whatever it is. And other people are like, oh yeah, that's relatable. I can relate to that. So this person is also going through, same struggles or similar things as myself. And then, like I said, there's a lot of promotion of like, these therapies and therapy apps. But then we also have the flip side of it. We have all these people with filters or even comparison. We're like, oh, they have such fabulous life. I don't have a fabulous life. Like I'm not on a boat or whatever. I can't wear a two-piece or, whatever it is they're comparing themselves to. So I feel like you have to, for me, I like to have social media in bite sizes, and I regularly have to detox from social media at times because it can become too much, it can
Yeah,
be too much, it's helpful, but then too much, I think, can be hurtful as well.
of course. I think one of the main things that I focus on when I'm working with teens specifically is understanding what their triggers are and then saying,
Yes.
okay, how are we going to navigate? Because I think to some degree, um, there's been a rise of like understanding of triggers, but then the expectation that the world is supposed to accommodate you based on your trigger. And so
Yes.
what I try to enforce to my teens is that, well, no, the world can accommodate you. We have to learn how to deal with the world and understand that this is in fact a trigger. So if this is a trigger for me, what am I going to do about it? How do I regulate? And how do I assess whether or not what I'm thinking or what I'm experiencing is factual or rooted in whatever fear or belief I'm holding, right? And so again, if I have a negative self-perception, then yes, social media could be a trigger because it's going to show me everything about myself that I may not like. So then in knowing that, we then have to say, okay, well, then is it something that we should be on? Should we be accessing it as much? Should we change our algorithm to be more, more beneficial? How can we navigate? Because that it's not going anywhere. So is there a way for us to navigate around it?
Yes, it's so true. And for my generation, it was the Cosmo and the Vogue magazines and the Teen Vogue, and I used to think to myself growing up, gee, their skin is so perfect, and that everybody looks so beautiful. And God forbid, I looked at Jet magazine and saw the Jet Beauty of the Week. Then I really felt bad. I said, oh, Lord. But we didn't know they were photoshopping it. We didn't know they were altering the body parts, even like ankles, So for us, we had all those images in magazines and TV. And so we could kind of push ourselves away from it. Like we didn't have to buy the magazine or we could change the channel. But now with social media and the ads and the apps and the algorithm, it's always in our face. It's constant for them, Yes. So this has been a wonderful discussion so far. We're going to go ahead and take our second break for the evening, but everybody stay tuned for more Pink Table Talk with Chioma Ahaiwe.
Join us for a captivating new series where Lon sits down with the trailblazers of the music and entertainment world. Discover the stories behind the faces and voices that shape our culture and community.
We will bring you exclusive interviews with industry legends and rising stars. Behind the scenes insights and get a peek into the creative processes and personal journeys. Artists and performers and their upcoming shows and events.
Stay tuned for more updates and sneak peeks. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our channel.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Pink Table Talk. The show is produced by Longwood Media Network, and we film live every Wednesday at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. You can catch us on our YouTube channel, our Facebook Live channel, Twitch TV, and over 18 different podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, Google, and Amazon. Tonight, we are talking about Black mental health in the community with Chioma Ahaiwe, a licensed practical counselor. So before we went on break, we were talking about the different disparities and the differences between how we present with mental health issues. So another issue that I wanted to talk about was the lack of resources in the community, and what can we do to change that? Do you think it's a financial issue, policy, legal issue? How can we fix that? Oh, sorry, licensed professional counselor. There's so many acronyms and
no, there's so many acronyms. Social work, counselors, there's so many. So I understand.
Yes. So where do you think the real problem lies with the fact that we don't have a lot of resources, we don't have a lot of counselors and therapists that look like us? And what can we do about it?
I think the problem lies in lack of knowledge, which is why I would say like I said before, psychoeducation is so important. Yes. A lot of the communities that I'd like to serve and I like to, work with, there isn't a really a level of understanding of what therapy is or how it can be beneficial, right? And so then if I don't really understand the differences of care between a therapist, psychologist, and a psychiatrist, then and I already have a belief system that I'm not crazy, I'm not seeing any of those, then of course I'm going to, you know what I mean, be resistant or hesitant to experience or engage with any of them. So I think the first thing is just the explanation of each, how each are useful. And even with like nurse practitioners, right? Some nurse practitioners work in the field of psychiatry. So even in explaining that, so I think first there has to be avenues or ways for people to understand what therapy is, how it's beneficial, and then of course trying to explain access, because every insurance does cover behavioral health. So Medicaid, Medicare, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, every insurance company serves and covers behavioral health. It's just a matter of seeking it out, right? And again, of course, finding therapists that you feel are going to be able to understand your experience. I'm fortunate to now know that there's an increase in representation of, therapists that are people of color. Of course, still a small proportion, but it is growing. The number is growing. So that, of course, too, is encouraging that we are, showing up more often in the field, and we are putting our best foot forward to advocate and show that we are here and we're available.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Me, since I'm in the field of nursing, I know that there was a big push lately for more of the PM HNPs. I love saying that. It's such a long acronym. But it stands for Psychiatric Mental Health Nurse Practitioners. And so they have kind of been standing in the gap with being able to provide more access to mental health services. So I've been definitely seeing a large growth in nurses going for that certification. And so you mentioned that there are other types of licenses and certifications one can obtain to provide therapy or psychological services. Can you tell us what those are and what's the difference?
Of course. So I'm an LPC, which is a licensed professional counselor. I'm able to offer talk therapy to clients. After a licensed professional counselor, I have my master's. After that, you have a psychologist who usually does assessments, right? So things like if I'm seeking out autism testing or things like that, you usually see a psychologist. Psychiatrists provide medication and things of that nature. So for instance, if I'm experiencing bipolar disorder or major depressive disorder and I'm in need of medication, then I would see a psychiatrist. Interestingly enough, all of us work in community together, right? I work a lot of the time hand in hand with a psychiatrist because the benefit of a medication is there, but the benefit of talk therapy is there. So of course, I would want you to have someone on hand that is going to be able to assist you with your medication and everything like that, and ensuring that we're giving you the appropriate care. But at the same time, we still have to get to the root of what's causing the depression and how to manage it or regulate it and things of that nature. So while the medication may alleviate the symptoms, it doesn't necessarily get to the basis of what's causing it in the first place, right? So we are all in community together to support the field to just ultimately be a benefit or of assistance to the client.
Yeah, wonderful. I think we are getting to a point where we are appreciating and accepting talk therapy, but I still think there's an avoidance to medications. Can you speak to us more about that?
Yes, I think with medication, and this isn't just mental health, but in general, there is a resistance to medication. And so explaining addiction, I think first and foremost, what addiction is, which medications are stimulants and things, explaining all of those things can be beneficial. So what I like to do is clients that I do refer to psychiatrists, any medications that discussed, I encourage them to ask any and every question that they have to that psychiatrist, right? Whatever concerns that you have in terms of having to take it for the rest of your life, getting addicted, it affecting your weight or your sleep, or whatever side effects they do think are going to be prevalent, discuss with the psychiatrist. And then when we're having session, we discuss what the intention behind the medication is, right? So explaining that, like, it's not a happy pill. It's not to solve all the problems. It's meant to support. So having those kind of conversations can be beneficial as well, to just, again, make the connection, right? We understand we may understand the diagnosis, we may understand that we're taking medication, but everything else about it, there may be some level of confusion that we try to clear up.
Yes, because I often hear people be like, well, I'll talk to somebody, but I'm not taking no pills because I'm not crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that we still have lots more education to do in the community about medication, and like we said, it's not just psychiatric meds, but even blood pressure, diabetes, it's the whole game.
Medication across the board. I mean, things are made to be helpful. I think in all things, how you use them and to what degree you use them is going to determine their impact, right? So that level of understanding too. If I'm taking something inconsistently, am I going to see the benefit of it if I'm not consistent with it? So yeah, also managing the expectation is also something we have to discuss.
That's true. Yeah, that is true, because people probably have high expectation. They feel like, okay, if I take the medication, I'm going to feel good right away. When often it could be the opposite for a little while before they start to receive those effective results.
Correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very nice. So if somebody right now is in need of mental health and they're looking for a therapist, what's one way they can find a therapist?
Well, I am always going to encourage people to use resources for us by us. So Therapy for Black Girls is a great way to look for a therapist. Because of the fact that, like I said, I do think there's been growth in the field, asking for referrals. You know what I mean? Asking your primary care physician, do they know any therapists? Do they have therapists that they would recommend? Your OBGYN, your PCP, whoever, you know what I mean? Whoever it is that you're seeing for your annuals, that could also be helpful. Of course, using like just general avenues like Psychology Today and Open Path can also be a way to connect. I would state, anyone that you meet with for therapy, try to get a 15-minute consultation with them for you to get a feel for who they are. Like I said, if there's a connection, because you may have a certain person that you're looking for, right? If you're wanting someone of a certain age, if you're wanting someone of a certain gender, that's okay. With therapy, you can be as specific as you want to be in what you're looking for in a therapist. As long as you have an idea, and the person meets your requirements, that's all that matters, right? So I would say just getting a general like idea or concept of like, okay, I know that I've had maybe some past sexual trauma. So I would prefer to deal with someone who has had a history or has background in sexual trauma, right? I deal a lot with, if I'm a veteran, dealing with finding a clinician that says, okay, my background is working with veterans. You know what I mean? So finding a clinician that meets your specific needs.
Yes, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for giving those great tips and advice for those out there who may be seeking mental health services. So we're going to go into our last break of the evening, but everybody stay tuned for more of this hot topic tonight on Pink Table Talk with Chioma Ahaiwe. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Pink Table Talk. Tonight, we're talking about Black mental health and the often negative stigma that can be attached to it. Before going on break, we discussed different ways in which one who is experiencing mental health issues or struggles can find a therapist. So Chioma, what is one thing a person can do today for their mental health?
Oh, today I would encourage everyone to check in with themselves. So whether you check in the morning or you check in the evening, take at minimum 15 minutes to just sit with yourself in your thoughts, and just, relax. If you're a person that likes to meditate, if you're a person that likes to journal, if you're a person that likes to, decompress with prayer, with a devotional, I would encourage everyone to take some time to check in with themselves. If you want to sit in a bubble bath for 15 minutes and just relax, with some candles,
Yes.
I would encourage everyone to take time to check in with yourself, to check in with your thoughts, how you're feeling. And then, of course, another one would be every day asking yourself what you have the capacity to give. What do I have the capacity to give today?
Wow.
That's another. If I'm not at 100 when I wake up, what is in my capacity that day, right? If I have all these things that I am saying I need to do, how much of it is realistic for me to accomplish today based on how much I have to give?
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. For me, this past few months, I've incorporated getting up earlier just so that I can have that extra time in the morning to kind of just sit, before everybody in the house is up,
That's your check-in.
Oh, I love it. And it's still a little dark outside. It's peaceful. I'm definitely into aromatherapy. I love my candles. I got candles all over my house. And, I get up early. I put my candles on. I sit and I might just sit in silence, and I'm just thinking and just mentally preparing myself for the day. And it really makes such a difference, It
does.
It really does. Yes.
It does. And it can be simple. It doesn't have to be overly complicated.
Yeah, exactly. Now for the men, though, they might not want to put on some candles and other things or do a bubble bath. I don't know. Maybe they do. But what are some ways that men can check in with themselves?
I do have, for my male clients, a lot of them do like to start the day in prayer. So, getting them to start the day that way with a hot shower. You know what I mean? Taking a 15-minute hot shower. If you're a person that likes to work out in the morning and you like to get after, taking the time in the sauna. The idea is to, within that 15 minutes, to be grounded and to just be still and to just sit with your thoughts, right? What am I thinking? How am I feeling? Right? How was my day? Right? So just assessing where yourself to say, oh, how was your day? How was your morning? How do you want your day to go if you do it in the morning? So yeah, it could be as simple as that.
That's wonderful. All good, very good ideas. You know what I love? They just have created these steam shower tablets. So if you are a person that loves a hot shower, you can get these little lavender tablets that you could put at the bottom of your shower, and it kind of fills the room with the steam and this aroma. So it's like a little therapy. Yeah, it's like a little aromatherapy sauna session in your shower.
No, if you're a person that likes lavender and that's soothing, vanilla, all of it, I would encourage all of that. All of that sounds like a great way to sit with your thoughts and yourself in the evening. It really does. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. So Chioma, what's next for you? Any upcoming projects? Any upcoming events? What do you have for the rest of this year planned out?
So for the rest of my year, you will see me at a couple events. They'll be posted on my website, as you guys can see on the lovely screen. I will be hosting a webinar. The date is to be determined, but I'm wanting to do a webinar around anxiety, right? And regulating our nervous system. And so yes, please follow me on my socials. You also can get updates there. My Instagram is Chioma Ahaiwe Therapist. And like I said before, my website, you can find me as well. But I will be hosting a webinar on anxiety. The date is to be determined, though. So, yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. It reminds me, what's that song? Anxiety.
Anxiety by Doechii.
Yes. You know, when I hear that song, I'm like, stop telling on me, please.
You know, everyone experiences anxiety. And one of the main things that I want to discuss is how we assume butterflies is not anxiety when it really is.
Interesting. Oh, that's going to be a wonderful, wonderful webinar, I'm sure. And for those of you that want to reach out to Chioma, definitely check out her website, renewedpathcounseling.com. Thank you so much, Chioma, for appearing on the show today. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. You can, again, reach me on my Instagram or via email, but all information is found, as she stated, on renewedpathcounseling.com. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, that's it for tonight, everybody. Stay tuned for next week's episode on Wednesday at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern on Lawin Media Network. Thank you all for watching us tonight, and have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.